One second.
I can start off with that. Good, recording is on, and I think I'm seeing the people at RSVP, at least to me here. So first, thank you everyone in WiSig and UD for taking the time out today to come to this Elevate session. So we've founded, like for WiSig at least, we started this partnership with Elevate a couple of years ago with Houston, who you guys heard from just 2 weeks ago, and he was telling about his recruiting journey, his experience through WiSig, and then transitioning over in investment banking. And then from there, Marcello maintained the relationship last year, and then now Alan and I are running this relationship this year. And then this is a new relationship that we started with UD just this year to provide even more students the opportunity to hear from Kaushik and to hear from Elevate. Because one of the main things that we realized is that because Yale does not have a direct finance curriculum, we need to provide other outside sources that people can learn about, first, how to prepare for finance, what are the different fields in finance, and then get to learn how to network with different people. Because at the end of the day, networking is a huge component to getting a role in finance. And it's sort of the platform that Kaushik has made here that he can talk about more, the Elevate platform, just to provide first an educational curriculum, like doing info sessions like this to help people figure out how do they pursue a career in finance. And then second, to provide a platform where people can connect with each other, not just from your own university, but across universities. And I know Kaushik has an extremely large network and has helped a lot of people in WiSig, has helped a lot of people in UD, people on our boards get connected with different employers and really walk through decision-making process if they have multiple offers, like which one should they take and which one is going to be more beneficial in the long run. So we're really, really thankful for our partnership with Kaushik and Elevate. And Kaushik, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Ed, and team. Excited to always be back to Yale. I remember, I think it was fall of 2019, Yale was one of the first universities that invited us to speak on campus and so on and so forth, Houston, and the team back then. So definitely long track record of sort of working together. I'll give you guys a little bit of my background as well. But, like Siddharth mentioned, really excited to be working with WiSig and UD here, but more broadly, right? I think now you're all a part of this network, which is actually a national global network where we sort of are partnered with about 100 student clubs across the top 30 undergrad universities and all of the top sort of 12 business schools as well, and every firm and every sort of professional in between. So think about it as something that will probably accompany you throughout your entire career, whether it's in undergrad, going and getting to a first internship, all the way to sort of post MBA, or in your careers in whatever industries you guys go into. So I'm super excited about that. Super excited for the moment to be on the platform. And I think what Sid mentioned, we'll cover a lot of topics today, but a couple of things I want to leave you, kind of with as you think about. Number one, a lot of what I'm going to cover is as much external facing as internal facing. And what I mean by that is the people that are the most successful in their careers, in these recruiting processes, et cetera, have given a lot of thought to why they want to pursue the thing that they're pursuing, not because somebody else is doing it, but it's because they've been very conscious, right, about obtaining information from the right sources, but also from people that they can sort of emulate in the process. So I think of this as sort of a full step journey. So number one is sort of that introspection. Number two is sort of the persistence through the journey, right? Many of you are going to find recruiting. Hey, Ty, nice to see a lot of familiar faces here. A lot of people, you'll hit a lot of road bumps along the way. People are not being responsive to what I'm doing, or I'm not getting traction at this firm, et cetera. But one thing that separated all of our successful professionals over the last few years has been that sort of persistence, as well as sort of, that willingness, right, to take risks and be okay with sort of rejection and kind of what comes with that. So number one, introspection. Number two, persistence. And number three, sort of the mentality that you sort of never stop, with this sort of growth and journey. Just like Yale, I'm sure was a target for a lot of you guys when you were going in, or sort of were excited to get in when you guys were going through the recruiting process. But now that you get here, you're like, okay, now what? How do I use this platform and leverage this to sort of do the other things that I want to do in life? Similarly, the internships you get, the jobs you get, it's sort of a continual journey to kind of get to where you need to be. So I'd kind of say always keep sort of reaching for the stars, or kind of looking at how you can be the best you can be, right? So I'll just start off by kind of some of those things. I'll give you guys a quick background on some of the stuff that we kind of had said. You alluded to this stuff on the Elevate side as well. And then we'll just get going. There's a lot, like I said, we wanted to cover today. Can you guys see my screen or no?
It's coming up now. It says Kaushik is screen sharing. There we go.
All right, excellent. So today, like Sid previewed, it's going to be about kind of recruiting and career success for investment banking and private equity careers. Give you guys a little bit about background about myself. I've been in investment banking and private equity since 2012. I spent 6 years at Goldman Sachs at the beginning of my career. I started in Goldman's investment banking group in our financial services, financial institutions group. And to take you guys a little bit back to 2012 when I started investment banking, a lot of people ask me, right? I think Sid knows this. Sid knows this, but this is, I think, our just this 2021 cycle. I want to say this is sort of our 30th or so event across all of our different universities. And the first question I get asked is like, all right, what industry should I go into, or what, both from a perspective of banking, private equity, venture capital, consulting, but also from like, the industry group itself. So industrials or financial services or technology. And I was faced with the same question back in 2012, right? What industry should I go into? I was fortunate to have gotten an offer at Goldman where we had a lot of great industry groups, but I was a little confused, right? So kind of where should I start? And I picked financial institutions because to me, again, I wanted to go into an industry that was going to be transformative for the next kind of 5 years and beyond, and where I could really get a lot of deal experience. So that's maybe the first lesson learned for you guys all here is go into industries where one, you have some element of passion and interest, and number two, where you really see as sort of the forefront of things that you want to be involved in for the next few years. For me, coming out of the financial crisis, it was the industry where there was the most transformation going on. And so I kind of went into that. And that worked out really, really well for me. My first 2 years at Goldman, I was part of over $100 billion of M&A and deals. And I got to lead three of the largest deals, right, that Goldman had led. In a while. So I think that obviously worked out really well for me. But that gets me to my second lesson learned for you guys is no matter what bank or private equity firm or wherever you go into, your goal your first couple of years should be to maximize the transaction, project, deal experience that you can get. Again, we'll get into sort of how to ensure that happens. But as you go and graduate from Yale and go and do great things, your work track record and the deals you worked on, or the projects you work on, the clients you work with, et cetera, are what's going to differentiate you, whether it's on-cycle recruiting, whether it's sort of other processes later on. So really, really important. Second lesson learned is to work on deals and a lot of different transactions. So I'll kind of go back to that. Then after investment banking, I went into private equity, as a lot of people do. I joined Goldman's private equity group, which is about a $100 billion mega fund that's situated within GS, as an associate, and made vice president in like 6 months, or about, I think, six months to a year. Again, one thing I will also hit on is it's a big transition going from banking to private equity, and it's one of the things that I think a lot of our audience in Elevate does. But my lesson learned here, number three, is you kind of want to keep challenging yourself throughout your career, right? So just when you sort of feel a little bit more comfortable, I think you want to try to do things that are a little bit out of your comfort zone. And so for me, that was sort of going on the buy side. And we'll get into sort of what makes good people, good investors and in the private equity side. So I spent, then I joined PE. We'll get into PE in a second. And then I had a chance actually to join another fund. So after 6 years at Goldman, had a chance to join another fund, Vardy Partners, as a director, and help them build out their global PE business. So again, opportunity, this is maybe my fourth lesson learned for you guys, is opportunities will be there, right? So I think, especially when you go to great platforms and kind of do that, as you go through your career, it becomes more and more important to really, really, be thoughtful about where you go to, right? So a great example is a lot of you guys will go into banking or consulting or PE and spend 2 years there, and then your programs run out. Then what do you do, right? So at every point, and after those 2 years, what do you do? And then so on and so forth. It becomes more and more narrow. So I think it's important for you all, again, to go back to that introspection I talked about, to start picking out where you want to be in the kind of 2 to 4 years, and what's the best position to get there. Again, we'll get back to that as well. Another kind of point, I mentioned this earlier, I did get to work on a bunch of transactions at Goldman, and over my career, worked on over $200 billion of deals. If people have questions, I'll go into sort of the M&A deals, buy side, sell sides, IPOs, split offs, all the kind of cool things behind the scenes of that. But I think the one thing from my lesson learned, and kind of you can ask, how was a 24-year-old or 25-year-old given the responsibility of leading an IPO as an associate? And I think one thing I will say is sort of try to take on responsibility, like do your job really well. So whatever you're supposed to do as an analyst or an associate, do it really well. But the way you accelerate in your career in your 20s is by doing like the next level as well, or start doing the next level as well. And the way you do that is, if you're an analyst, go shadow your associate and take on some of the responsibility and say, hey, do you mind if I do this for the client? Or do you mind if I do this for the client? And the sooner you can start doing that, the sooner you get more responsibilities early on in your career. So I will say that. We can come back to that. And then another lesson learned, I think for me, I got the opportunity, given sort of some of my performance and also just generally some of the things I was interested in, to take on a lot of leadership roles within Goldman, right? So I was asked to be chief of staff within investment banking in our FIG group. And that sort of meant, looking after the analysts and the associates, looking after sort of the recruitment pipeline, looking after analyst, associate, candidates, hiring, recruiting, et cetera, summer offer committees and so on and so forth. And maybe that's I don't know what number I'm on now, but 6th or 7th lesson learned here is take on leadership roles, right? So whether it's YSIG or UD, the thing, or obviously when you join the real world. And the reason I emphasize that with all of my students is, these careers, right? Banking, consulting, private equity, growth equity, they're very kind of individualized careers where you're working on deals at all the times and you're working on teams, but you don't have a tremendous amount of opportunity as an analyst, associates, or even vice president to like managerially take on responsibility or sort of be a leader in that sense of the word. So I encourage you all, because that's a life skill. And I think it's really, really important that the thing that differentiates our, best directors or principals or partners is the ability to lead people. So that's my next lesson learned for you guys, is take on leadership where and when you can, even if it's a little bit out of scope of your job, right? So me being chief of staff, I still had to do all the stuff I had to do as a professional, right, in banking or PE, but I also had to do this other stuff. And so, that's another lesson learned. It on the flip side, doing a good job on that got me tremendous exposure to leadership at GS, and that served me extremely well, right, through your career. So some of the things that I think I've learned as far as my career journey to date. I can go into any of this stuff if you people have questions, okay? So, all right, let's keep it moving. Elevate. So Sid wanted me to highlight on Elevate as well. Some of you guys know this, who've been on this call. I see some familiar faces to events that we've had over the last year or two. I think one thing I've missed in the industry, growing up through the industry, is I think really a platform and a network for people at every step of the journey, right? So it's going to every step throughout the industry, whether you're an undergraduate, whether you're a professional, whether you're an MBA or post MBA. So, we wanted to ambitiously build what is like the largest network for banking, private equity, hedge fund, venture capital, growth equity, et cetera. And I feel like we've successfully done that. And we want it to be built 100% by pros. So we learn a lot of academic stuff at school, but how do we build something that we have direct professional access, and every generation kind of helps the next generation, right? So my private equity associates now, who were in your shoes 3 years ago, but now they're in private equity, come back and teach my bankers how to sort of make the transition. My bankers come back and teach you guys how to make the transition, and so on and so forth, right? And my MBAs come back and teach my PRI private equity people how to go to an MBA. So this whole journey, right, every step of the way, is kind of what we want to create as a platform. So within Elevate, I'd say we have sort of four main missions. One is, can we build a best-in-class networking platform? It's really, really, really hard to build your own network in this career. And so I think our goal is to simplify some of that. A few people on this call have actually worked on these projects with me within Yale. So I think that's exciting. Siddharth came to our networking event in New York last summer, which, we had all of our schools come to, and which was really cool. So the goal is, obviously we're doing it all as a platform, not in live events yet, but how do you build your network? Then we have a lot of professionals. Like I said, we've probably hosted over 100 firms and professionals, and I'll give you some examples of that. You guys will get info on that as well. Learning, I think we've sort of built what is the largest learning platform, where we have about 500 or 600 videos just directly from professionals. I'll preview you guys in a second. We have a recruitment platform, like Siddharth alluded to. We are building an investment platform, which is going to be really cool. That's more for my private equity professionals, but maybe there's avenues for you guys to get involved in, and so on and so forth. And sort of our partners, we are partnered with 100 clubs or 100 organizations across the top sort of 30 universities. Similarly on the MBA side, as well. Speaking of MBA, we're actually hosting Wharton at an MBA event next Friday. So I'll send you guys information about that. And then a view on sort of professionals on the platform. You'll kind of see we've had on, hundreds of professionals. So you should go back my point in raising this is that learn from people who've been successful. Like that's the best way to sort of learn. Anyway, we'll come back to this. Like I said, we have an MBA platform. We have a diversity conference coming up for banking, private equity, venture capital, all this stuff. So let's sort of dig into this stuff here. As you guys have questions, please raise your hand. We're going to cover a lot today, but do raise your hand and ask. I think that, oh, Andrew, okay, why don't we start with your question
Yeah,
on
I'd say hello, my name's Andrew Hitcho, and I was just wondering like what would you say to your like 20-year-old self that you think would have been beneficial to hear now after your years of experience?
Yeah, I'd say two things. It's a good question. I think, two things. Number one is like, don't do things, you know, just, and this is not like that I didn't do this as much, but I think, spend a lot more time introspecting or building experiences to figure out what you want to do with your life, right? Whether it's professionally, obviously professionally, right? So I think it's just really important because a lot of us sort of go into these careers, I think, thinking like, oh, everybody else is going into banking. Let me also do the same thing. And it's sort of one of those things where you learn a lot for sure, but you sort of have to consistently keep yourself honest that, hey, is this kind of what I want to do for the next 6 months or next 2 years? The flip side of that is that these are sort of, even if it's not a career that you want to stay in for 20 years, it definitely gives you a great starting point, right? So just figure out that there's trade-offs to all of this stuff. So make sure you're okay with some of the trade-offs professionally. It's the first thing. Second thing I would say is one of my biggest regrets my first year at Goldman was I didn't network enough. So the Goldman Sachs, and kind of give you another side, all of these firms, right, wherever you go to, are huge firms with amazing people. My first year is one of the biggest mistakes I made, and I'm pretty upfront about mistakes I've made, is that I was like so focused on just being top bucket my first year that like I just would spend every minute just at my desk, just trying to do as much work as possible and like really make a good impression. While that seemed like it worked, it was very short-term mentality. Whereas what I wish I had done is like, after my first 3 months, I wish I'd sort of just reached out to like random people at the firm, maybe who worked in the securities division, or maybe who worked in Marcus, or maybe who worked in XYZ, wherever it was, and sort of reached out to them and said, hey, I'd love to sort of hear what you're working on. Again, it takes a little bit of like, intestinal fortitude to kind of do that and outside of your work. But I didn't do that my first year. And I felt like, I reached the end of my first year and I was doing well within the firm. But then I was talking to some of my partners and they were like, hey, who are the other people that you sort of know in the firm? And I was like, honestly, like I haven't taken the time to meet other people at the firm. And he's like, well, this is a huge missed opportunity because, this is an amazing place, as a firm, and a lot of people will go on to do a lot of great things. And so I took it upon myself, Andrew, my second year, like almost every week I would sort of have coffee, or this is before COVID, obviously, so we could actually be in the office and stuff. But I think, I think that's another thing I would tell my 20-year-old self is like, you guys have an amazing network with Yale. One of the things my juniors and seniors do, which is a huge mistake, is you get your internships like your sophomore year, right? By the time like August or September rolls around, most of you will have internships for your next summer. And then they just sort of stop networking for the next 2 years. And I think that's a huge like disadvantage because, when you're a student, you still have the opportunity to sort of build these relationships and people are willing to talk to you, right? So if you go into banking or if you go into consulting or PE, if someone reaches out to me, I automatically assume they're reaching out to me because they want a job. Because I'm like, why else would, a Morgan Stanley investment banker reach out to me? So my point is there's this huge baggage that's associated with someone who's in banking reaching out to someone versus someone who's a student. So my second advice would be to just really continue to build your networks wherever you are. And maybe my third advice would be just continually make some help people out, because the world is so small and it's so well connected that if you sort of help people out without wanting something in return, you will get 10 times as much, when you want something. So that's sort of maybe my third piece of advice there. Okay, Andrew, good question.
Yeah. So basically just like expanding your network, taking advantage of unique opportunities at your position, at any level in your career, basically. And like, basically just use your network to find new opportunities, new jobs, meet new people, build those relationships so you have them in the future.
Right. And it's not, networking is not just about finding jobs, right? Because networking could be about you're raising capital or you're an investor and you're finding new ideas. again, maybe my comment to what you just said, Andrew, is that I wouldn't take as much of a transactional approach to networking, like, oh, I'm networking so that I can get a job in the future, or I'm networking so that you can introduce me to a VC that will then help me raise funding for my company, or whatever, right? So I think it's more about just building, structured relationships over the course of your career and using that mentality such that when you need something, you have a strong enough network that you can take advantage. So it's a little bit of a slight change in mentality, maybe. Does that make sense, Andrew?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, of course, you got it. Okay, good questions. So, shoot. Can you guys see this anymore or no? Okay.
It's coming up. There you go.
All right, cool. So I will just spend, I think in the interest of time, I'll spend just a few minutes on the next few slides. The first page is sort of how do you find the right career in finance for you guys? I kind of break this down into 5 main careers, which is where I see sort of 80-90% of our Elevate audience go into, which is investment banking, private equity, private investing, growth equity, venture capital, public investing, and corporate strategy. Kind of investment banking, we've kind of covered this already, but it's effectively like client advisory. So as a junior person, you're working on complex deals, you build deep financial skill sets. There's definitely less of an operational focus in investment banking. And then as you progress, if you decide to stay in that career, it's a lot about deal execution and strategy. The second is private investing. So I would say investment banking, about 40% of Elevate's audience goes into investment banking, 40-50%. Another 25% goes into private investing. So kind of private equity, private credit. And here the crux of this job is operating as an owner, right? Not as an advisor. You're just investing in private companies at different stages, usually late stage in this case. And the job as an analyst or associate here is you are kind of deep diving into a company versus as a banker, you're doing more deals, but less deep dive into a company. The interview process for private equity is a little bit different, and I'll get to that a little bit later. But I think the nice thing with Yale is, I would say maybe, banks wise, I'd say about 50-60% of banks come on campus. I think private equity company wise also, I'd say about 50-60% of the ones that have programs come on campus. So part of it's like finding the ones that don't come on campus and then, going through that process, but also obviously taking advantage of the ones that do come on campus. Growth equity, venture capital, some of your own student leaders are going into these careers, but it's sort of private investing, but for an earlier stage, right? So you're doing non-majority investing usually into earlier stage opportunities. And here you have less data, right? So whereas in private equity, you're going through and doing a ton of data analysis. In this case, you're doing a lot more like industry analysis, due diligence on the particular customer, the market, the product, the product market fit, the product itself. And so it's a little bit different as far as investing goes. There's public investing as well, which, we won't spend a lot of time on here, but it's the hedge fund world, right? You can go back, we've had on Citadel multiple times. You can go and hear from those folks on kind of what they do and other firms as well. And then corporate strategy consulting, here's again, clients facing, but you're doing more strategy and operations. So for some of my like underclassmen, right? So freshmen, sophomores, I will sort of say this, right? So the next question I get asked, right, is where am I in the journey? What should I be doing at every given stage in the process? And, how should I be doing that? So the first thing I'll say for any first years in the audience, right? Number one, you're 6 months into college. It's a huge transition, especially with COVID and stuff. So just, on-campus involvement, important. Finding your footing on campus, important. But as you sort of spring to the spring semester here, I think career exploration and just getting an internship for the summer, I would say it should be number one priority for you guys as first years. And then the number two priority or 1A priority should be strong performance at your university, right? Because as some of my sophomores and juniors know, a GPA is important, right? For your summer internship process as a sophomore. So continuing to do well in school, really important. For my second years, I would say now you're kind of in the land of getting internships now, especially in February, March now, you are in the process of networking with firms. And so the number one goal for you guys should be networking and building your relationships with a lot of these firms. Number two should be sort of deeper career exploration. And in part of that is nailing down a sophomore year internship, right? Before you can kind of get a junior year internship. And then you've got sort of the recruiting and interviewing process, which will come later on. I'm not going to spend as much time on the upperclassmen and analyst stuff, since I think a lot of you guys are still underclassmen. Recruiting creep principles. I would say there's 5 main things I want you guys to focus on. Okay, number one, university. What I mean by that is you obviously go to a fantastic university. However, you go to a university that maybe does not have as much of like a huge presence of finance on campus, nor, I think Wall Street has a lot of Yale alums, but they're not sort of as active, or not every bank, right, comes on campus, right? So a little bit of you is to find kind of who are the school specific recruiting teams that are at all these different banks or private equity firms, and then sort of how do you build relationships with those people? And then related to that is which firms come on campus. So there's sort of two decision trees here, right? If a firm comes on campus, go to the events and start building relationships with the people that come on campus. If the firm is not coming on campus, then build organic relationships with alums who are part of the recruiting team, right, at that firm, such that you can get an interview. And why I think that's important is, as you guys can imagine, on the recruiting side, I'll just give an example from Goldman. From any school, we would get 300 resumes, right, or at least for a summer internship job. And our recruiting team, we were tasking them to say, hey, can you guys get that 300 down to 50 people we can give higher reviews to? As you can imagine, that's impossible when every resume looks amazing on paper, right? So how do you guys make that distinction? Is via networking. And that's why I think it's important to build some of these relationships. The second thing I want you to focus on, obviously academic performance, but not from the sense of like, I need to take all these hard classes, or I need to kind of get my GPA up. If you're a sophomore, your GPA kind of is what it is, right? So the bigger thing I want you to sort of focus on is the story aspect, right? So, if you are a philosophy major, or if you're a liberal arts major, kind of what was the reasoning behind that? How does that going to help you in this career path, or kind of why'd you make those decisions? I think those become more important. Again, we'll come back to this if folks have questions. Internship experience, the third thing that's really important, feels like a little bit of chicken or the egg, right? Our underclassmen are always like, hey, not a lot of people are recruiting underclassmen, but at the same time, we need you guys to all to have jobs. By the time you guys get to your recruiting process. So the goal really is to find and progress through from your first year internship to your second year internship, third year internship. So I'll get into some of the specific things you guys can do on that front. And the key here is this, like establishing relevance to your role that you're recruiting for. So let's say you interned at a startup your freshman year. That's okay. It doesn't have to be a hedge fund or an investment bank, but then taking that experience and then talking about how that's going to help you in this industry, I think more important. Networking, obviously really important. I can get to this. I think a lot of questions I get asked, or have already gotten asked in the last couple of weeks as I've been doing this, is like, hey, I'm not getting responses to my email, or like, nobody sort of, I'm reaching out to 100 people, but only am I getting responses back from 10% of those people. So let's talk about in a second about how to improve that hit rate. And then finally, obviously interviewing. I think the key to interviewing is storytelling, and it's not, it's not as hard as you guys think or make it like, oh, I need to go memorize a billion formulas and sort of, memorize all these technical stuff. That's important, but 90% of your interviews are all going to be behaviorals. And so really how do you kind of communicate that story and do it effectively? All right, well, let me pause here again and make sure that we're not kind of we're kind of getting questions as they go. Will people have questions? I'll pause real quick. Sorry. Did I, or not? Are there any
I think
questions?
we have one question, Kaushik.
Oh yeah, oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Your background is like yellow, and as is your hand, so I could not see it. So yeah, Young Bin, what's up?
Hi again. So first off, thank you for hosting this. But anyways, given that you've kind of climbed the ladder at Goldman Sachs and lateral to the buy side and overall had significant deal experience through M&A and capital raisings, now how has the dynamic of learning evolved? What have you, I guess, come to value more as you've gone through your journeys?
Yeah, and sorry, you cut off on like probably the most important part of your question, which is it learning that you said? How has that evolved?
Yes.
Learning. Okay, cool. All right. So one thing before, I think some of you guys asked for some of the LinkedIn stuff. So I'm going to reshare that. 1 second. And then also share some of the Elevate stuff for you guys. Even before I jump there, I want to share one thing that I'm super excited for you guys for. I think Itai and some of you guys already know about this, but our team has just done a tremendous job of, let me know if you can't see this. So we have this thing called Academy, where basically you can go in, and we're going to add a filter thing here, but there's over 500 videos, literally from, if you're like, oh, I'm interested in TPG, or I'm interested in KKR, or I'm interested in, I don't know, like, Morgan Stanley. Again, we're going to do a filter situation here for a second, but if you're like, oh, I'm really interested in Warburg Pincus, what are the interviews like, or what is the sort of experience like, I highly suggest you can go check these out. These are like 2 to 3 minute videos directly from professionals who are working there or are recruiting at these firms. And so it's like Warburg or TPG or Carlisle or just, Primera, General Atlantic, KKR, just, again, these are all buy side, and I can't find any banking right now, just off the top of my, oh, this is a good one for banking, right? So like, or Goldman Sachs, right? So what's the difference between your summer experience and your full-time experience? So things like that, where I think it's just super cool because, I mean, obviously we're very fortunate as the Elevate platform that we all these people go on and become great professionals like you guys, and then you'll come back and do this. But think of the people that are 3 to 5 years ahead of you that are doing this for you guys, right? So the number one gripe I have from undergrads is, oh, I don't have enough resources that are high quality that sort of help me in this journey. Like, I don't know what to do. Should I go into banking or PE or growth or VC or consulting or whatever? And so we've just tried to democratize really access to a lot of that info. So I highly recommend you guys should check that out. To your question, sort of, you can learn from other people as well. So that's the reason why I bring that up. Youngmin, it's a great question that you asked. Number one, I think is learning wise, today's industry in private equity or growth equity or banking to an extent has become more and more specialized. And so whereas in years past, you could join a private equity like generalist associate program for a couple of years and sort of figure it out. The people that I see as really, really successful principals, vice presidents, director level people are the ones who are able to sort of specialize early on. And again, you don't have to specialize when you get right out of college. I think it's as you go through, because the industries have become so nuanced. 5 to 10 years ago, or 10 years ago, you could pretty much LBO any company and probably make a good return. Okay. Cause I think, it was, markets were good, people where there was less access to information and there was sort of less sophistication in private equity markets. Today, on the other hand, there's a ton of capital, but there's so many nuances to sort of any industry and sub-industries because there's so much more access to like data, information, customers, all that stuff. So my first advice for you all would be start identifying early, what are the industries that are really passionate about? And I would go even deeper than technology, right? If you start with technology, I would say, okay, is it B2C? Is it B2B? Okay, let's pick B2B. Is it security? Is it enterprise? Is it cloud? Like just start developing views on stuff. Not that it's going to define what you're going to do in 10 years, but the exercise of going deep into industries is going to teach you a lot about your own skill set. And that'll actually help you in banking, recruiting, or private equity, or growth equity, or venture capital, or consulting recruiting, but also, where you spend your first 2 years as an analyst has become increasingly important. So, and what I mean by that is people also ask me like, oh, I just want to join any group at Goldman Sachs as an example, or any other firm. I'm like, well, what if I placed you in an industry you absolutely don't even want to go into, like natural resources or some other industry? They're like, oh, it's okay. I just want to go to that firm. And I'm like, well, that's so silly, because by going into an industry that you don't want to go into just because you want sort of a brand name, is not as impactful as going into an industry that you really want to do, because that's going to set you ahead 2 years faster in your career, right? So if you go into an industry and then have to sort of pivot later, that's going to just, set you back. So my first big lesson learned for you is we become much more specialized as it relates to industry knowledge and stuff. So I just think about that for your own careers as you go on ahead. We know several people, a lot of people in the Elevate, they're like, as a sophomore, as a senior, or as a first year banker, they're like, I want to do healthcare, so I'm going to go join healthcare. And then they translate that right into healthcare investing or consumer retail or financial services, fintech. And that's really helped those people. But obviously the downside of that is you got to know what you want to get into, and there's an exploratory journey as well. So I think that's one big lesson learned. I'd say the second sort of big lesson learned is, I mean, I talked about the relationship thing. I don't want to talk about that again, because I think it's sort of like, beating a dead horse. I think, anyway, I'll come back to that. It's just, that's one thing, is just about kind of the specialization. Again, there's a lot more, but in order for me to go into any of these, it might take a little bit longer. So if we have time, I'll come back to some of these. But
no, thank you so much. That's
yeah,
perfect.
of course. Yeah, happy to. And okay. Oh, by the way, I know you guys, okay, if you have direct questions, you can ask me, I guess. I'm just looking to the chat. Or if you have other things, or what's your LinkedIn? I just added it. Okay, so let's go to Gauri. What's up?
Hi, first of all, of course, thank you so much for being with us today. I know you have touched a bit upon networking and the importance of it, but something that I always find myself thinking about is just how to get into it as the first year. It seems a bit daunting. So if you have any tips that you could give us on how to approach networking from this 101 standpoint, I think that would be really helpful.
Of course, yeah, happy to. let me go to some of the slides, and I think I have a couple slides on networking, which will be helpful for you guys. Let me just pull that up. Great question, Gary. I'm happy to hear underclassmen also sort of, think about some of these things. Again, it's a tough balance between sort of trying to enjoy your first few years of college, but then recruiting is so early these days that you sort of have to be ready, So I think I appreciate the question. We'll come back to these other slides, resume building. So networking, okay. So again, don't read all this stuff. And Siddharth, I think if people want, I can share these slides afterwards and you guys can read it in your own free time. Later on, if that's the case, just let me know and I can share. Yeah, okay. I can share that with you guys. But like networking is a great sort of, it's a good question, Gary. So the first thing I would say is, one is you have to have sort of a long-term approach to networking in the sense that every single day you may not be progressing on your networking journey, but when you get to like end of a month or end of a semester, end of a quarter or end of a semester, you should have advanced the ball, right, on the networking front, right? And what I mean by that, right, is you're going to get busy with school, you're going to get busy with, classes or extracurriculars, et cetera. And as a freshman, right, there's not this like huge need to network, right? Because you kind of think, I understand the trepidation because you're like, what am I going to bring to the table? Why would someone want to talk to me? What value am I adding? Am I wasting people's time? And that's why I get back to one of the first principles, again, not on this slide, is just sort of figure out what your purpose and outreach is, and then sort of try to accomplish that purpose. So as a freshman, outreaching to sort of a private equity firm, which is a large cap private equity fund, to get an internship, it's sort of unrealistic, because they don't have internship programs for a lot of the younger students. Same with investment banking, right? Like you as a freshman might, if you go reach out to like Credit Suisse or Evercore or Morgan Stanley, they don't have freshman programs for you. So it's like, what do I even do with you? So your purpose and outreach, I think, can be a little bit different. You can sort of take the approach of, hey, we're from the same hometown, or we're involved in UD or YSIG. I saw you were, people in Houston's class, right? Those are good examples, like, Bishoy, Jordan, there's a ton of those people that are now in either private equity or investment banking. Reach out to them and say, hey, I'm a freshman at Yale. I'd love to sort of hear about how you thought about your career journey. I really, the key here, Gary, is to make it personalized, right? So don't just send the same email to 100 people. Just be like, hey, Houston, and I'll call out Houston because we obviously, I know him really well. But you say, hey, like Houston, I noticed. Again, be a little genuine. Don't like BS it too much. But I think just go into their thing and say, hey, Houston, I noticed you went to sort of a really awesome boutique bank. Kind of, I would love to, whenever you have 5 minutes or 10 minutes, get on the phone or Zoom and just hear about your decision process and sort of, how you chose where you ended up going, your experience as Lion Tree, and also sort of any advice you have for you, someone in my shoes, as I'm kind of going to this career. So very low barrier to entry email. You're not really asking him for an internship. You're not asking him for anything. Just like, hey, when you have some time, like, just would love to get on the phone. The reason why that's important is two things. One is, let's say you reach out to 20 people, 5 will respond. Okay, Gary, because you're a freshman, people are going to be like, all right, well, the other thing you'll notice for my sophomores, I will get to you guys in a second. Now is recruiting season. So your hit rate on emails are going to be like 2 to 3x bankers replying back to you, whereas it might've been in the fall, right? So like, just keep track of that, because every firm is now focused on getting and hiring. So you'll get a little bit higher hit rate for my sophomores now going through the recruiting process, but we'll come back to that. But again, back to your current question, Gary. So be organized around the process, because networking is a double-edged sword, right? You don't want to get on the phone and completely make, like a joke out of it, in the sense that you're like super, not you, but an individual is super immature or doesn't ask the right questions, or just kind of, makes YSIG or Yale or, yourself look bad in the process. So be prepared, right? And sort of come prepared with questions, but also know that your first networking call is awkward. It's really, really hard, and it's whatever. So maybe you practice with, Alan or Imad or one of these guys who are sort of more senior to you, but just kind of practice makes perfect, and go about doing that. But your approach as a freshman, especially for some of these investment bankers and private equity people, should be from a place of learning and from a place of like, hey, I saw you do this in your career, that really resonates with me. Like, I'd love it if you have 5-10 minutes, to get on the phone. He or she might come back and say, hey, I don't have any time this week, next week. Can you reach out to me in a month? Make a note and then reach out to them again, right? So that's kind of what you do. Then there's a different level of networking to get your summer internship. In that, I would be more aggressive, right? So whatever industry you want to get into for the summer, go reach out. And there, I think you should say more like, hey, I noticed what your company does. maybe it's an investment bank in New Haven or Boston or New York and say, hey, I'm really looking for a summer internship. This is kind of what I'm working on. I'd love to sort of discuss, your firm more, and I've looked into your portfolio and blah, 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 blah. So I think if you're there's sort of the two tiers to networking. For my sophomores, now going to my sophomores, networking again is now even more important. Still the same principles hold, right? The first thing is now you're in recruiting mode. So give me a reason to respond to your email, right? So for instance, Siddharth emails me and he says, hey, I'm Siddharth, I'm class of whatever. I'm, at Yale, I'm involved, in these clubs. And, I'd love to I'm very interested in Goldman. I'd love to kind of get 5 minutes on the phone. That's an okay email. I think a better email would be like, hey, I'm Siddharth. I'm, X, Y, and Z leadership roles at X, Y, and Z clubs. Last summer I did X, Y, and Z. And I, saw that your background, you went to Yale and interned at Goldman and now we're full-time. I'm really interested in this. I'm particularly also interested in industrials, which is a group that you're in. For instance, I would love it if you can kind of just give me 10 minutes as I go through the recruiting process. I would love to connect with you and learn more. So something like that one gives them a reason to respond to you. Number two is just direct and telling them what you want out of them, right? In terms of that. And then also kind of express interest in why the firm and why their background, much better email. So I think for my sophomores, be very targeted towards networking, your networking to sort of get on these closed lists and get on these things. Once someone accepts your invitation to have a call, be utmost professional. So literally check your emails religiously. Don't go 2 days between when a banker emails you and then you're responding to their email. Most of the time people will forget that they even talked to you. So I'd say 12 hours or less, go back to them and say, hey, oh, thank you so much. I sent a Zoom already, and don't wait for them to reconfirm, super reconfirm, triple deconfirm, none of that stuff. As soon as they say all the time, just send a Zoom with the link. If they need to cancel it, they'll do it later. So just avoid all these barriers to entry for you guys. And then say, hey, thank you so much for your time. I've already sent an email out and a Zoom out link for this. Look forward to speaking with you, right? Or something like that. And then just keep it moving, right? So I think, and then once you get to the call, go in with a list of super well-prepared questions. These are interviews at the end of the day, right? So go in and say, have your pitch ready, 90 seconds or less of who are you? Why should they be interested in talking to you? Why them? So why are you speaking to them? What about them is interesting to you? And then sort of, leave them with something that's memorable because that sets the tone for the rest of the conversation. And then go in with a few questions. Hey, I noticed you interned here. So how was your summer internship like? Or can you tell me a little bit more about the global industrials groups or global healthcare group and types of deals that you're working on? I worked in a healthcare company last summer. I'm very interested in healthcare. I would love to hear about X, Y, and Z. Blah, 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 blah. So I think those are the types of things that, or maybe tell me about a deal that you worked on. It's really, really cool that you guys get to work on this. The whole purpose of this is having 2 or 3 really good questions that they can answer. Then be active listeners, right? So the number one thing I notice with these networking calls that the bankers tell me afterwards is I'll be talking about a deal and then they will just go down their list, be like, oh, Kaushik, tell me about, X, Y, and Z or whatever. And they wouldn't, and I would have just talked about a deal. What a better answer would have been to say, hey, that's really cool. How did COVID impact the deal? Or how did, kind of X, Y, and Z happen? So you just ask these little follow-ups that tells them that you're listening, okay? And that sort of are engaging with that person. And then finally, end of the email communication, following up, super important. Within 15 minutes of the call, email them. Thank you for your time. I really learned X, Y, and Z from you. I think it's super awesome that I learned like the importance of following up, blah, 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 whatever. So take notes in these calls, right? Or take notes after these calls. Keep yourselves organized, whether you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, whatever it is, make an Excel spreadsheet and note down every single person you've spoken to, and then what you spoke about, and then follow up. And then in the email say, hey, Kaushik, really enjoyed talking to you. I really appreciate your advice around, focusing on industry, blah, blah, blah. And then if you don't mind, I'd love to keep you posted of how my recruiting process is going and so on, right? So I think just kind of keep it out there. And then even at the end of the call, right, saying, hey, I really appreciate your advice. Would you mind if I kept you up to date on my process? And also if there's other people in the team that you think I should meet, I'm happy to sort of, would love to, right? So just keeping that dialogue going, following up, really, really important because you kind of want to, you want to have a call. You also want to have a relationship with that person, right? So that's my general goal on networking. I know it's a huge topic and we probably don't do it justice in like a 5-minute overview, but if you guys have questions, we can sort of go more in detail about it. Okay, so Gauri, is that helpful? That was sort of a comprehensive attempt at answering your question.
Super helpful.
Okay.
No, very, very helpful. Thanks so much. And then I would just say, like, as you said, keeping that relationship going and finding those people that you can develop strong relationships with. Do you have any, like, if you're just starting to get into networking, places that, like, things you should research in order to find people to connect with? Like, how does that exactly work?
Yeah, okay. So
Like
for
making
my
your first
underclassmen, yeah, my number one thing my underclassmen tell me, so sophomores or freshmen, is like, how do I get a sophomore year internship? Or how do I get sort of a freshman year internship, right? I spoke at Penn last night and I told them the same exact thing. I'm going to tell you guys the same exact thing. And I told all my students, there's the cheat sheet to this is, yes, you can go and apply to every job under the sun, but just look at where your seniors interned their freshman and sophomore year. Like if it's sort of a private equity firm in New Haven, or it's a, hedge fund in Boston, or if it's whatever, just go through some of their LinkedIn or reach out to them and ask them, hey, how did you go about your, sophomore year recruiting process? And then you already know what firms are recruiting, and you can sort of just like, or recruiting Yale candidates, and go through that. I mean, there's other ways to do it, right? You can go and sort of reach out to alums and so on and so forth. I think the first step would be to sort of figure out where people have done and then sort of replicate it. The second thing would be, look, if you're really interested in an industry, just doing a lot of research on your own, right? If you're interested in consumer retail, go and look at the 5 or 6 biggest consumer deals of 2022, and then figure out what VC firms invested in those firms, and then go reach out to them and be like, hey, I'm really interested in venture capital. I noticed you guys just did a deal for XYZ company. I'm really tracking the space. I want to get, I love getting, I love this industry. If you guys have, I'd love to connect with you. And if there's any opportunities to kind of do X, Y, and Z, I'd love to do that, right? So I think just making these things uber personalized and sort of whatever, I think I've always found to be helpful. And then just general networking, just keeping organized. I think going through LinkedIn, or going through, frankly, if you guys come to an Elevate event and see a professional, email them, right? They will much be more likely to respond to your email post this, because that's already a warm connection. So use all of your warm connections. And the Yale connections, especially both SOM and undergrad, just go through your alumni network and make a list of people and just start reaching out to them. Obviously, you have a purpose, the same exact thing, Gary, that I said earlier in terms of the purpose and outreach, but your mechanics can be sort of more around sort of using sort of every leverage, your high school networks, your personal networks, your college networks, your SOM networks, like whatever you guys need to use it and just get in the habit of sort of doing that. But don't do it without a purpose, right? Don't just email a billion people. Like, start small and sort of expand from there, especially for my freshmen and sophomores. Cool. Is that helpful? Okay, brilliant. Yeah, of course. You're welcome. Andrew, was there another question, or is that
Yeah. I just had a few more things that popped into my mind, but
okay.
number one, is the background you have your house?
No.
No.
It's a Zoom background.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know. Okay.
No worries.
Number two, this is kind of like more of a personal question for you
Yeah.
and your like work experience. But so what are like these big firms, like big private equity, venture capital, whatever, firms like Goldman Sachs doing with the massive amounts of money they have, 100 billion AUM, you were saying, to help solve like the climate change threat and the threat that poses to us in the future, and the financial liabilities it could cause, and the insurance claims for heat stress in the next 50 years due to rising temperatures and as well as sea levels, while the fossil fuel industry still dominates the energy sector and political sector?
Wow, that's loaded. Okay, so I invite you to also like message me offline, you know what I mean? Or if you want to, I don't know that we have enough sort of time to go into all this, but I'll sort of do my best with the time we have, with just a couple minutes. On your first point, that is not my apartment, but it is kind of like my apartment in the city. So it's sort of that. So I'm actually in California right now. So that's the background. So it's not my apartment, but it reminds me of mine without all the sunlight and stuff. But on the second question around climate change, look, or just large amounts of capital. Look, I think you can kind of see, right, with the inflated with the inflated sort of stock market, and I shouldn't say inflated, but sort of how valuations have gone up. and also just general increase in wealth, right? So you have a lot more LPs, right, that want to invest in capital. So that's led to a lot of GPs raising a lot of money, a lot of capital to invest in X, Y, and Z. Also, there's been sort of this incredible influx of technology where a lot of our private equity and growth equity firms have been able to invest in a lot of amazing ideas and pull them forward, right? So as it relates to sort of how do you invest $100 billion of capital, I think when you ask an investor that, they will find ways to put $100 billion to work, or $5 billion or $1 billion or $500 million to work. It's just about sort of finding. It's not as much about capital as much as it's sort of finding great ideas and sort of great opportunities. So Andrew, I think that's part one maybe of your answer. Second thing about ESG, climate change. Look, I think if that is an interest of yours, right? So if that is an interest of yours, like last Friday, right, we had on in the office hours someone from, I think I saw some of you guys on there, but from TPG, and they have a TPG growth equity, and within growth equity they have this fund called the Rise Fund, which primarily invests in in like clean tech, climate energy, sustainability, agriculture, food, and all that stuff. So I would say if that's an interest of yours, right, there's definitely firms, there's hundreds of VC firms now that are investing in those things. So I would just sort of research those opportunities, right, and sort of figure out and make a case of why that's interesting. I myself am actually also an investment partner at another venture firm or growth equity firm that invests in sort of Web3, climate change, space exploration, and some of these other things. So again, it's a huge area that I think is definitely something that is going to sort of transformative, right? But now it's sort of figuring out, Andrew, if that's of interest to you, just like everyone on this call, like, how are you going to become a good practitioner or professional in that space, and how are you going to become like the best, right? So I think the purpose that you guys all should have, I really want you all to become the best in whatever it is you want to do. If it's investing or if it's, whatever, great. But if it's education, or if it's clean tech, or if it's, I want to become the best entrepreneur that I want to be, that I can be, and I want to build things, so be it, right? So the one of the takeaways I want you guys to take out from this sort of session is finding what that is for you all, right? So go into banking, go into PE, go into whatever you want, but your career goal should be to become the best in whatever it is that you want to get into. And then at the same time, sort of work in areas that you really enjoy and sort of make an impact. So that's my last point on that, Andrew, is that like, if that is of interest, you absolutely pursue it.
Right.
And go for it. Yeah.
I have my own energy consulting startup firm, and I'm also in the Department of Energy's Energy Tech University Prize.
Okay.
If you know that.
I do not.
It's really cool. It's like $250,000 in prizes.
Okay.
And it's hosted by the Department of Energy for a business pitch idea.
Okay. Excellent. Why don't you send me some info, and I'd love to look into it. Just message me on LinkedIn and send me some info, and if there's things that I could collaborate on that or give you connections to, I'm happy to. One thing I will say, my team wanted me to ping me to let you guys know this. We're doing this thing where we're having our students, or we're inviting our students to sort of put up a testimonial. So I want you guys. It takes 10 seconds. So if you enjoy this or whatever, it helps my team sort of go out and build the Elevate platform. Just put a 5-star testimonial that says, hey, I took this at Yale, and this is kind of what I learned. Again, it takes 10 seconds. And so that I'll send this out to you afterwards also, but I think it obviously helps my team. But Andrew, to your point, if you want to send me stuff and want my advice or thoughts on something, just feel free to ping me on LinkedIn, and I'll try to get to it. I want to keep moving on sort of a couple other topics that I still had. So we hit networking, interviews. Okay. So we went out and asked like maybe 30 to 50 bankers and PE professionals on sort of what are interviews like. And so this is kind of the cheat sheet or lessons to that. This is sort of the main interviews that you guys will get asked in an interview setting. Tell me about yourself. I already went over how to do the 90-second pitch. Really the answer is to help us understand why you, right? There's 100 people outside the door. I don't want to hear about why Goldman Sachs or Blackstone is the best place in the world. I want to hear why that's the best place for you, right? So I think, that's really, really important into communicating that first 90 seconds of sort of why you're here. Then I'll go into sort of what are your strengths. And I could do this multiple ways, right? I could say, hey, why will you be a good analyst? Or, what are things that have helped you succeed in college or whatever, but coming in with 3 or 4 things that you can talk about with examples, really important. Third thing, What are your weaknesses? I remember when I was doing interviews at Goldman, I would ask this question in like 3 or 4 different ways. What are your weaknesses? What is feedback you received? How would you change how you'd work? Or, what do other people say as your areas of improvement? Again, they're all getting the same thing, right? Does this person have self-awareness around the things that they need to get better about, and how do they answer this question? Accomplishments, difficult working situations. We'd also ask a lot of situational questions, right? So things like, how have you handled conflict? Tell me about a time where a teammate wasn't doing X, Y, and Z, when you had to deal with multiple deadlines, when you had to deal with, going to an assignment or project and your team wasn't there and you had to present stuff. So a lot of these things, right, that we would ask, and situationally, we'd say, oh, Gauri, like, it's Friday afternoon, the client calls you and wants all this stuff, but your MD isn't around. What do you do? Or you have 2 MDs giving you 2 projects. How do you balance those things? So just a lot of situational questions, because we want to get a better sense of how you handle those things. Best way to answer those is sort of, one, talk about an example of what you've faced with like that similarly in the past, and then kind of come with a high-powered answer on, hey, this is what I'm trying to get into. We're trying to, at the end of the day, solve clients' needs. And so solve from what you're trying to solve, and then go about how you're going to do that. I think is the best sort of way to answer those types of questions. My point here is that also have 5 or 6 really good stories. I just know, having seen like 2,000 to 3,000 interviews, people that have stories and are able to kind of put the situation, task, action, results framework to it and really show multiple layers of depth, really the ones who kind of differentiate themselves. So therefore, be ready for follow-up questions when you kind of bring up a story. We don't have a lot of time to go to the technical stuff, but generally, I'll get to the technical stuff. But what's more important, I want to understand why you're tracking the markets. What deals are you following? What industries are you following? What do you think about the interest rate environment? Or what do you think about X, Y, and Z? And I'll really get to those questions in the interview as well. I don't think I'm going to have time for higher view stuff, but generally, prepare strong examples, network, network at the bank to get a feel. Follow current events. There'll always be 1 out of your 4 higher view questions will be current events based. Keep your answers concise. They give you 2 minutes. Try not to get to the point at minute 150, because sometimes on the other side, we may only listen to the first minute of your answer, right? Just given how little time that we have in sort of, evaluating these things. So just keep them concise and get to the point. Don't get flustered. If you get an answer that says, hey, tell me about your biggest failure, it's a hard question. Hopefully you're prepared for it, but sort of don't then start talking about your strengths, right? Just kind of get to the sort of think about what you're trying to answer and come up with the right answer, good answer for that. Keep it conversational. I think, and obviously you guys have been on Zooms enough that you can see that. Technicals, I don't think we're gonna have time to do this here. Private equity, I think, let me go to sort of the last couple slides here. I think the question I get asked a lot about is sort of some of the lessons learned for my junior people, like summer analysts, and full-time analysts. So I'll just get on this in a second. What differentiates people who get offers? Number 1, ensuring top quality of work. You'd be surprised, right? That the biggest thing you're asked to do as an analyst is like modeling or, things like that. So wherever you can be cognizant of details, super important. And because that really builds your reputation as an analyst or summer analyst. Be ultra responsive. Okay, this is another good one where, like I said about responding 15 minutes or less after you get off the phone with a banker or private equity person, same thing here. I've seen where, I've sent an email, or a director sent an email to, one of our analysts and had said, all right, what's the status on this merger valuation packet? And then the summer analyst or the analyst will not have a status because the person they're working on is not responding, and they'll just wait to get a response. So rather than doing that and freak everyone out on the team, respond within 5 minutes saying, hey, I got your message. I'm tracking down the status. I will let you know as soon as I get it, right? So this idea that you have to always have the answer, it's better to be responsive than always sort of come with an answer, right? So it's kind of what I'd say on responsiveness. Taking ownership, we'll come back to that if people have questions. Communication, being a good team player. I think, the best analysts have sort of always lead with, hey, where can I help? How can I help with this, right? Rather than sort of being an outsider, be like, oh, do you need any help? And that's almost like, oh, I don't really want to help. I'm just kind of asking because I want to. Always better to sort of be a good team player. Be curious outside the minutia. This is going to be important for you guys as you go into investment banking or then private equity. Most of our investment banking analysts or some analysts kind of focus so much on, oh, I did this model and this is kind of what the model said. I don't care about that. I care more about, is this a good deal? Is this a good company? Is this a company you'd invest in? What's going on in the space around this company? So on and so forth. So much more important for you guys to sort of, to position it that way. be professional, obviously, keep organized. I give this example a lot, but day one, you're sitting around waiting for emails. Day 5, you have 1,000 emails in your inbox. So you guys should start learning to be organized as soon as you hit the desk. Resourcefulness, efficiency, leave things a better place. You know, I think that's important. And then personal relationships. So anyway, I think that was a lot. I do tend to speak fast, but I also like, you know, I think I want to cover a lot of things today. Are there any other questions that people have? I've given you guys a lot of links. I will submit via Siddharth all the upcoming events, like our diversity panel. We have on 6, you know, people who are going into like Goldman, Morgan, I think Evercore, and a few other banks. They're going to speak about recruiting processes, and they're going to talk about summer success. That's going to be in 2 weeks. We have this forum with, you know, Wharton and Blackstone and some of these firms next Friday. So I will just give you guys, I'll send via Siddharth. And I think one thing is, if you guys want these slides, I think you should go back and register for this event if you haven't, because that's where I'm going to be getting all the emails from. So I would say if you should kind of send it up. And yeah, Siddharth, I mean, these guys are great resources. So definitely take advantage. Both of these are tremendous groups. I think, yeah, any other burning questions that people have before I drop? I added the testimonial link again. Just takes 10 seconds. Just fill it out. You know, 5-star testimony, where you took it. Really helpful for our team. Yeah, of course. All right, if there's nothing else, I'll turn it back over to Siddharth. Great to be back here, guys. Great job, great turnout. And yeah, I wish you the best of luck. I want to see everyone be successful. You know, as you're going through the recruiting process, if you feel like you need to drop us a note, you know, shoot me a note, say, hey, I'm getting a lot of traction here. Great. I want you all to be on these panels next year, right? So next year, as we turn the clock forward, you guys will be on the other side, sort of leading some of these things. So that's what I like to see. But ultimately, I want you guys to be, you know, successful and achieve a lot of great things in your careers. And these are sort of just first steps to that. And I'm sure we'll be seeing a lot of you guys as we go through this process. Okay. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Siddharth.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kaushik, for taking the time out and even going over right now. Like, I'm sure you're super busy, and we really appreciate you going through the process, walking everything from what to do in your first year, what to do in your second year, how to network, and how to continue to network. I think 2 of the big takeaways, especially for everyone recruiting right now, is first, build a story and figure out like what your story is from what you did in high school, what you did in your first and second year about, and how that's going to lead to where you are today. And then also network intentionally and make sure that you're not just getting on the phone and just spending 30 minutes and taking the person's time, but you're networking with a purpose to get to learn something. And it's not just necessarily in banking, but to learn about different fields as well. And like, as always, as I was mentioning in the beginning, we're really thankful for this Elevate partnership. It's been super helpful. And after your event in the fall, I had a ton of first years reach out to me. Like, it really helped explain what the banking process is. What are the different products that banks even offer? What's private equity? What's the industry look like? And I'm sure I'm going to get a very similar response after this.
Yeah, first of all, Siddharth did an amazing job of summarizing like what you should do after sort of a discussion. No, I'm kidding. But my point is like, you know, I always love coming back to Yale. Like I said, we have such great, even though it's a smaller program for finance, it was such amazing alumni that you know, every panel that we'll have, you'll have at least one Yale on. So I think it's just such a great network. Another 2 things I'll look out for you guys. I'll send Siddharth. We are having another private equity panel, Siddharth, where we have like 6 or 7 professionals in March, and another VC panel this year. We're doing 2 different panels because there's a lot of interest in both of them separately. So you should definitely check that out. And yeah, just don't stop building relationships. One other thing I'll say, you may not end up with where you want to be your summer or whatever, but guess where the first place you'll go to sort of make the full-time bridge? It's the people you've networked with in this process, right? So when your summer internships are ending, you'll go back and reconnect with some of these folks. So just know that these are always warm connections that'll carry on through your career. And then take the time once you're on the other side to help people who are, you know, going through this later on, right? That's the other thing. Make this a better place for each other. And yeah, take advantage of all these resources. So as always, love being back. Great job, everyone. Best of luck in this process now. And yeah, keep us posted. And I look forward to seeing everyone be successful. Okay.
Thank you so much, Kaushik.
I'm going to drop. If you guys want to stay on, I guess Siddharth has offered that. So I'm going to make you co-host or host, and then I'm going to drop. Okay. Bye-bye, everyone.
Perfect. Bye, Kaushik. Thank you. I'll follow up with you.
Yeah, of course. See you guys.